Hey guys, welcome back. We are in the shoulds, which is part of distorted thinking in chapter 4, anger and rage. We shall continue. As a therapist, I am amazed by the number of times a day I hear the word should. I am not a person who thinks that one can never have obligations or that guilt is a dirty word. However, we do have choices in life. There are probably very few things which must always be done. Circumstances will often dictate what our choices will be. Where the word should coming from when used in connection with something that must be done. Who was thinking that it should be done? Okay, so I'll be honest, sometimes I do use the word should when talking with my own therapist. Doesn't mean that I follow through, right? And it's not just then, like when I'm getting organized, should I do things? Yes. Do I always follow through? No. That is probably my problem. But anyway, continuing on. When the shoulds are coming from an old tape being played in a person's head, it is time to question the validity of that should. Is it something that someone else thinks is necessary? Do you have the same values as the person who instilled that should in your head? To be honest, I believe there are times when shoulds should be inserted in some people's heads. For instance, when one member of a family is always the one to help an infirm relative, and everyone else just allows that and does nothing, contributes neither time nor money. Guilt is the correct response. So I'm going to disagree with that sometimes with relatives especially. Sometimes there are relatives that can only be managed by one person. Now, could you essentially have a plan where you take turns dealing with this person? Yes. But sometimes distancing yourself from certain members of your family is best. I know that's hard to say, especially as adoptees, but it's true. Whether adopted or biological, sometimes that is best. Okay? All right, anyway, moving on. The uninvolved members should be made to pitch in and help or feel guilty about it. Again, I disagree with there. Guilt is appropriate here. Most of the time, however, when I hear should mentioned in my counseling room, it has nothing to do with values of the person sitting there or helping a family member. It is some vestigial should left over from childhood, when mom and dad were in charge of one's life. What is being left is a form of manipulation perpetrated upon the individual by someone wanting some form of control. Often that manipulation is not even going on in the present, but it is a tape running in the person's head. I know adults who live alone, earn their own living, and are generally independent. Yet, who still won't allow themselves to do something, buy something, or change something because there is an old tape from childhood playing in their heads? You shouldn't do that. If you were advising that person, what would you say? Are you willing to say it to yourself? So maybe because of my personal experience in those terms, I'm very good about, I'm not good about finances per se, but like, do I spoil myself? Yeah. Do I spoil my kid? Absolutely. When it comes to my shoulds, like I was saying earlier, it has more to do with my to-do list, my, like, oh, I have to get this done. I should do it. And then, again, don't follow up. I think I personally would blame my ADHD and autism, but is it always the case? Probably not. Probably not. I think part of it is also procrastination. And I'm not going to say procrastination and, having ADHD and autism and chronic illness don't come hand in hand. I think there's moments when at least for me, my ADHD can be a superpower or it can be debilitating, right? But does it mean I'm lazy? Not necessarily, right? And I want us to remember that although my channel is not focused on that, procrastination does not equal laziness in all circumstances. Okay, and I hate when people say that. That it is so. All right, continuing on. As long as an individual realizes that their choices may run up against another's choices, it is better to use phrases as I want, I like, I choose, or I prefer, rather than I must or I should. However, if we take a job where we are obligated to be there on time and stay until a certain time, and we choose not to do so, the boss may also make a choice to fire us. In other words, we have to choose wisely. Now, that I agree with, and again, I think that's where my shoulds have been. Although I work for myself, it's not always helpful. But definitely in that sense, absolutely, everyone has multiple choices throughout the day. Not just multiple, like there's hundreds of choices we make a day. What time do we wake up? Do we shower in the morning or the afternoon? What are we wearing? What are we eating for breakfast, lunch, dinner? What route am I taking home? Things like that, right? That's, again, if you have a choice. Not everyone does on the route. But you guys kind of get the point that sometimes, right, for example, on my way home, I could take 4 different routes, right? Sometimes I call it my shortcut. It's not really that short, but I take one road. I take a right turn earlier than normal, and I go a little bit slower to, look at other farms and to just be more in nature and go a little bit slower and not necessarily have to be behind a high traffic, stuff. Now, that being said, can I get stuck behind a tractor? Absolutely. This has happened. Okay, let me go back to a couple weeks ago. So I should have, right, left 15 minutes earlier. Then I wouldn't have been stuck behind a tractor. Okay, you guys, I'm in the country. All right, I'm on farmland. Had I left 15 minutes earlier, I would not have been running late to my doctor's appointment. You see where that should is? Right? So, in that time frame, what can we learn? You leave earlier. Now, I'm usually one that leaves early and likes to be there early and all that jazz. That's just me. But when you have other people that you're relying on to go with you and they're not ready, that's frustrating, right? And so sometimes, not all the time, it depends on the person. Sometimes you have to tell them that the appointment is 15 minutes earlier, right? Or just so that you get there on time. You see what I'm saying? Like, it depends on the person. It depends on the choice. There's choices. And we have to understand how our choices also affect other people. When it comes to anger, right? When it comes to reactions, we can be angry, right? Again, it's a very valid emotion. But how are we reacting? Are we yelling? Are we throwing things? Are we hitting people? Those are going to affect another person, right? Now, I know that some of you all will be like, well, if you're in a certain situation, yelling might be necessary, or, physical contact might be necessary for your safety. I understand that. I'm not talking about those times. I'm talking about like Nancy Newton Verrier was saying, if a car cuts you off, right? Or you happen to be running 15 minutes late. It's those little things, right? We have to understand that affects us. in the long term. And especially when, a lot of us bottle up our rage, it just simmers and simmers and simmers. And that's not healthy either. It's not. We are humans and we have a range of emotions. I mean, animals get angry too, right? But we have a range of emotions. And I think it's really important that we name our emotions and we work through it. This is a great case of watching Inside Out, right? Where you have different emotions and each one is valid. This is also important when we're teaching children, right? We expect as a society for children to be so well behaved, and yet we often see grown adults, well past the age of 25, because we're going to talk about how our brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25, but not even acting maturely. I've seen children, toddlers, young children act better even when they're in the worst moments, act better than full-grown adults. And everyone expects those children, oh, we want child-free places. Oh, don't bring your child into, oh, your child has to act X, Y, and Z, right? First of all, it's a very neurotypical world, let alone not child-friendly, right? Not women-friendly, because who watches the children majority of the time? Women, right? But yet, people are okay with grown adults. I shouldn't say they're okay, but majority of the time it's grown adults that are causing the problem, right? And I think part of this in how we respond to people, right? How we deal with situations that are especially out of our control, right? Are we going to berate the customer service person? They can't help you. Sometimes they don't have control. Let me say that. They don't have control. Are we going to berate them? No, you should not. I understand getting frustrated. I do. And you can be frustrated without berating that person, without being rude. If you have to huff and puff, like, that big sigh, I'm so sorry. I'm very frustrated right now. You don't even have to expand on that. Or if it's like you could be upset with yourself. Oh man, like the coupon went bad, whatever it may be, right? Or, oh, I thought this was on sale and it's not. Big sigh. Okay, get it out of your system and move on, right? Instead of looking back on, oh, I should not have done this, or I should have acted this way, right? It's a lot of regret. So I want to take this moment to say, for this part of the chapter, think of it as a lesson to be learned for how to do better. And one of my biggest phrases that I live by is, be a better person than you were the day before. My other phrase is, treat others how you want to be treated. And I think if we walked into the world more like that, with these two golden rules, I personally think that our world would be a much better place. I'm not going to say it's perfect by any means. I think there's a lot of, things that need to be solved. But if we can work on ourselves and be a role model for our children and for the children around us, right, that look up to us, I think that's extremely helpful. And yes, again, last time I'm going to say this before I go. Anger is a valid emotion. How you react to that anger, that is what we're talking about. Anyway, I hope you all have a terrific day, and I will see you guys next time.